President Trump's new attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is raising all kinds of questions after his latest media blitz. The former mayor now saying the president may not comply with a special counsel subpoena.
We don't have to. He's the president of the United States. We can assert the same privileges other presidents have. President Clinton negotiated a deal in which he didn't admit the effectiveness of the subpoena.
But he did testify.
And Mayor Giuliani is unsure if the president will plead the fifth.
Are you confident the president will not take the fifth in this case?
Oh, how can I ever be confident of that? When I'm facing a situation with the president and all the other lawyers are, in which every lawyer in America thinks he'd be a fool to testify, I've got a client who wants to testify.
Mr. Trump's attorney not ruling out if Michael Cohen made payments to other women on behalf of the president.
I think if it was necessary, yes. He made payments for the president, or he conducted business for the president, which means he had legal fees, monies laid out, and expenditures, which I have on my bills to my clients.
Wow. So, is Rudy Giuliani helping or hurting his client, the president? I'm going to ask you to start us off, Brian.
Couple of things. I think that the tone that he's setting is exactly what the president wants. He's aggressive. Enough of sitting on my hands. Oh, you want a million pieces of paper? You can have it. You want anything else? I hope you don't call me for a meeting. Oh, you're interviewing my friends? You're hassling my family? It's okay. Those days are over. What Rudy Giuliani has to do is inform people about what he's doing. He's got to understand it's a legal team. And even if he has the best or worst plan, everyone needs to know. The communications department didn't know what he was doing, and the rest of the legal team didn't know what he was doing, and it's totally dispirited the White House in particular. I think President Trump and Rudy Giuliani knew what they were doing. I don't think he was that surprised. I talked to him for a half hour on radio, half hour on Fox and Friends, about 20 minutes on the phone the day before. There was no panic. There was no oops. There was no what have I done here. He felt as though he was on path. What he has to do now is come back and say, we got to speak with one voice. In one way, I think he set the tone, which is a positive. In another way, he set him back on the Stormy Daniels situation.
So, Dana, I think a lot of people were struck by some of the things that Brian just said, which is that folks at the White House were like, we didn't know this was coming. We didn't know this was going on. They're all kinds of in shock at this. And in addition to which, the suggestion that there may be more payments came as an absolute unsettling factor.
I don't know. I mean, there is a school of thought amongst some people that it's better for the press secretary or the people doing communications for them not to know certain things because it protects them from something. I've never subscribed to that theory, but I know that it exists, and it'll turn out however it turns out. The only thing I'm focused on is something that I asked John Yoo, who's the legal scholar who's at Berkeley, very accomplished lawyer, and he knows a lot about the executive, the branches of government and how they have to interact. And I said, what is the settled law of whether a president can ignore a subpoena from the judicial branch? And he said that it's like one of the one things that has never been decided by a Supreme Court. So that actually, this could be kind of interesting.
It's like a ripe issue.
It could be the first time that it's actually decided.
Yeah, I think the court said that you have to give them the documents. So the question is about the testimony. And by the way, Kimberly, you hear the president say, you know, Rudy's new to this. He'll get his facts straight, which is like, well, is Rudy on the page or not on the page?
Rudy's on the page. That's actually a vote of confidence from the president saying, yes, they're very close. He relies on his counsel. And he's saying, look, we've come onto the case very quickly here. He's catching up, getting up to speed on everything. So now he's going through it. His goal is to protect the president, protect the family. He's trying to be forthright and transparent and answer the questions. He's not ruling anything out or in. And that's how it should be. A smart lawyer doesn't, close doors. You have to make sure and say, okay, this is what we're looking at. We're going to evaluate it, make case-by-case determination and basis here. And in terms of whether or not the president would have to, testify or would he take the fifth, et cetera, there's some other legal hurdles and challenges here. And you've had some key rulings as of late that have actually benefited the president, where you've seen the federal judges kind of put a stop to some of the nonsense, saying this is too wide in scope. We want to see the memo, the scope memo, to make sure you can't just engage in a fishing expedition and try to reel in the president of the United States, his family members, and anyone else that he might, have communicated or or have knowledge of this. So I think that there's going to be some legal hurdles for Mueller, not to mention how many people that he might have coming forward with the testimony they're going to be impeached or have no credibility whatsoever, like, in terms of the Mueller investigation. So I think that's going to be important, too. Who's going to be left to testify that hasn't been inconsistent statements or resigned from the FBI or written a book? Good luck.
So, Greg, the two people left out of this. One is apparently Jared is disposable, but Ivanka is off limits. Don't go after Ivanka. And then Michael Cohen, he says yesterday, Michael Cohen may be cooperating with Mueller.
I watched a lot of the coverage when I'm at the gym, not by choice. And what I've realized about this story and why I hate it so much, and I know most of America hates it, it is now lawyers interviewing lawyers about what a lawyer said. And what are the legal ramifications of what they said? We're not sure, so let's get a panel in to talk about it. This story is bordering on the tulip craze. It's self-fueled hysteria generated by those in the media who feed off it inside their bubble, and they don't care that outside the bubble, America really doesn't give a damn. We don't care. This is how it starts. They wake up in the morning, the TV executives, should we do Stormy or should we do Mueller? Let's do Stormy. Okay, somebody said something about Stormy. Okay, let's get a panel in to talk about Stormy. All right, now let's get the legal panel to parse the words of the person who just talked about Stormy. Then we'll get the next panel in for the political ramifications. And while this is all going on, someone else will then start the process over again by saying something about Mueller. So then you could switch from Stormy to Mueller. Meanwhile, Trump's numbers continue to go up. America gets incredibly fed up and burned out by this. And I'm telling you, there's going to be a rebound to this that is going to help Trump, because people are tired of hearing about lawyers and experts talk about subpoenas and explaining and summarizing facts that we really don't give a flying crap about.
Well, you tell you what, those two judges who made those comments, who I thoroughly understood without a legal degree, who came out and said, you don't want Paul Manafort, you want Trump. And the other one says, you had an indictment, and why don't you just produce the evidence for this indictment? I'm not giving you any more time. The IG report's going to be very revealing.
All right.
I still don't care.
All right, guys, hold on.
Sorry.